While researching photography in games, I stumbled upon a fascinating essay by media researchers Sebastian Moring and Marco de Mudis, who compare photography with its pointing and shooting cousin, the FPS. There was this quote in the essay that really stuck with me. All instances of gunplay require the player to point at something, whereas photoplay requires the player to frame something. And I love the use of that word, frame. It can have the purely mechanical meaning of physically arranging objects inside of a boundary, which is what most photo games in the past have asked us to do. But frame has a second meaning, which is the practice of using subject matter to provide context. And that's sadly kind of rare in photo games, but it's not non-existent. Okay, so literally in the midst of writing the script back in late 2020, a brand new game was released called Umurangi Generation. Thanks again, Todd, for recommending it to me. I checked it out and I thought the visuals looked great, and it's a game I could actually get my hands on, so I thought I'd give it a try as a way to wind down while I ride out this whole quarantine. And wow. That was a mistake. I scrapped literally everything else I was working on and instead made the finale of this entire photography miniseries to be dedicated solely to this game. So, as you can imagine, it's kind of a big deal to me. I haven't been able to relax for weeks because I'm obsessed with it, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me just talk about how it all started. So, after Todd recommended this game to me, I decided to watch a few videos to kind of see how it worked. And there's this really cool thing that I discovered. So there's a promotional beat that just about every indie game developer worth her salt has to walk when she finishes her game. And I call it neighborhood knockin' and talkin'.
What we do around here is we knock and talk, we wheel and deal, we swap and trade, and we deck up.
How it works is you try to think of another game that people who might enjoy your game have already played. For example, if I'm making a maddeningly difficult sliding block game, I would probably look at people who've played Steven's Sausage Roll or Wilmot's Warehouse. Then you go on YouTube and you collect about 100 Let's Players who have played Steven's Sausage Roll, get about 100 emails, and give away about 100 free copies, and maybe 3 people will play the game for their audience. Then you go into your room for a few days and light a prayer candle over your useless college degree and hope your cousin, who is a successful electrical engineer, doesn't call to tell you what a great life she's living. Anyway, what's kind of fun, if you know about knockin' and talkin', is you can sometimes figure out what another developer decided was a similar game to theirs. And I'll let you guess what Veselikov, the creator of Umurangi Generation, was pitching to other YouTubers.
Umurangi instead uses a hyper-stylized, cartoony art style. The inspiration from Jet Set Radio is pretty damn obvious.
Inspired by Jet Set Radio, Umurangi Generation is a first-person photography and exploration game.
Oh, I'm working on some video stuff late Monday night when I get this email from the developer Vez. I have never seen someone so passionate about Jet Set Radio, which is why I want to offer you a review code of Umurangi Generation.
So, according to Veselikov, people who like Jet Set Radio would be into Umurangi Generation. And that kind of makes sense, right? The aesthetics are there, there's kind of a punky vibe to it. Maybe there's a cool storyline about road rebels saving the day with photography, complete with cool action sequences, I don't know. Yeah, turns out that's a complete and total misdirection. I can tell you that while these two games look similar, they are absolutely nothing alike. But Veselikov wasn't necessarily wrong when they marketed the game to people who like Jet Set Radio, even though normally I would probably recommend you never try to trick people into buying something like this. Veselikov could have marketed the game with a neighboring game that was more true to Umurangi's story, but unfortunately, that probably would have spoiled the surprise. And they knew that the little bait and switch planned later on down the line would be more appreciated this way. At the outset, of Umurangi Generation, players aren't told much more than how to operate the camera, a tool that does take a little bit of getting used to, but which is capable from jump of taking pretty interesting shots. Plus, there's a couple of lenses and filters to play with. I personally appreciate that the first lenses I was given seem to me some of the hardest to understand, so being forced to interact with them before more things are unlocked helped me get familiar with them in a helpful way. Whether intentionally or accidentally, it kind of strives to teach a little bit about real-life photography, which I appreciate. Anyway, the last instruction I'm given before playing: don't take pictures of the blue bottles. So it's time for the first level, Mau Wow View. Again, starting out, I had every impression that this was a simple point-and-shoot game set in a cool cyberpop world. I wandered around, taking some pictures that were assigned to me and some that weren't on this neat little rooftop vista. Everything is fine. Everything is totally normal. Ignore the giant milk bottle. That's probably just a cool, artsy set piece. The cool thing about Umurangi Generation is while you do have objectives in each level to take photos of certain things, which is just like any other photography game, the objectives are actually more of a means than an end. A handful of them have loose requirements and can be completed in more than one way, which I thought was a brilliant touch. But some of these shots are actually hard to find, or they require you to seriously think about how to position yourself. So it's not long before you're in the habit of trying to climb up to the highest points you can find, or crouching low and using your camera to read text on a small object. And as you do this, you unconsciously take in a lot more information about the world, even more, I would argue, than many walking simulator games where a story is often told entirely through the environment. And of course, there is one important aspect of the game that elevates this much further from a walking simulator: your camera. Okay, I don't want to get into the story too much because part of the fun of this is exploring the imagined quote-unquote shitty future of real-world location Taronga on your own, but I really want to talk about it. I will say this fake future Taronga takes place in a country far from where I live, and it's heavily stylized, but at the same time, the place and the story resonated with me where I am now. Things are rough in virtual Taronga. What used to be a popular port and vacation spot on the coast of New Zealand has been transformed by violence and litter and some unnamed global giant milk bottle crisis.
So I'd already sort of made a little bit of a demo before this happened, but as those bushfires in Australia hit, I think that informed a lot of the decision making in terms of the subject matter and stuff. The bushfires and that are there, but there's also, I think, the way in which sort of the neoliberal political system has sort of responded to it. You know, it's one of those things where it's a bit cyclic in nature because it does have similar responses to, you know, COVID and, you know, the police brutality at the moment, where neoliberalism as a system is really good at making people comfortable in the face of really terrible things.
For those of you watching in the future, first of all, thanks for making it to the future. But the United States, where I am from, is in the midst of several pretty severe overlapping crises that straight up aren't being handled at all. Other countries are going through a similar situation. So Umurangi Generation's setting, inspired by these events, is fairly, but frankly, pretty bleak. But this is the best part, because you are in possession of a camera which is an art creation tool, and art is a form of communication. You are no longer a passive entity in this world, and the message is not simply being dictated to you because of your camera. Existing in an environment where you would otherwise be completely powerless, the player has the power to frame this world how they want. Umurangi Generation is sneakily set up, so I had plenty of extra shots I could take outside of my weirdly specific objectives. I don't know how I got pulled into doing it, but I remember asking myself, what do I actually want to take a picture of? Do I shoot vignettes of this unfolding story? Do I capture edgy shots of the desperate, cynical graffiti that kind of reflects what I feel? Do I just want to shoot what's pretty as a defiant way of clinging to beauty in a time of turmoil. It depends. In Umurangi Generation, it's going to be different for everyone. In the third level, I came across this little candlelit memorial to a girl floating on gorgeous crystal blue water. I remember thinking it was the prettiest thing I had seen so far, but I just couldn't take a picture of it because it felt disrespectful somehow. For me, the kinds of pictures I like to take were mostly living people, especially ones who were hanging out or doing something kind of ordinary. I think because I am a generally optimistic person, even though I cuss a lot, the humanity of those pictures inspired optimism in me. Now, that inner search I went through, those opportunities for self-expression, at first, they seem like a fun extra feature, but by the last level, you definitely realize they're what Umurangi Generation is truly about. The brilliance of this game is that it's built to subtly guide you to those moments. Just because the world in this game is fake doesn't mean the photos I take don't have meaning. Each one was a deeply personal decision made as a response to the ideas of the game's creator, or even the game's fictional world. And while games are an inherently interactive medium, I honestly don't encounter many that are so open to that conversational tone, even other photography games. In other words, this might be the first photography game I've played that actually wants me to frame something. So that's why, even though sometimes the controls were clunky and I kept accidentally pressing buttons I didn't mean to, even though I hated using the telephoto lens.
Like, you put me in such an uncomfortable situation. Like, you know I'm not happy. You know I'm trying to see if it'll work out here, and I know that it's not.
And the low poly art style did make me motion sick, so I had to stop playing every few minutes. I couldn't put this thing down. I think that Umurangi Generation is the best photography game that's ever been made. It might also, incidentally, be the best game of 2020. Plus, it's really fun. I cannot tell you what a fucking idiot I was just wandering around. Like, why am I being paid to take photos? And how come I'm not allowed to take pictures of the blue bottles? And what are these milk bottles? It kills me how much I want to talk about this, but I can't spoil it for you. Please, I'm begging you, play this game and play it blind. Oh, fuck, it's so great. I'm really happy that my research, which started at Pokemon Snap, ended up here. I thought about capping everything off with another speculation video about the new Pokemon Snap, or maybe doing a fun how would I make a photography game, but I honestly don't need to anymore. This, to me, is a very satisfying conclusion. And hey, apparently while I was making this video, new Pokemon Snap announced a release date and it's coming up pretty soon. So I guess we really came full circle, huh? So that's gonna wrap it up for today's episode. And this is going to conclude the mini-series about photography and cute games. Definitely check out the other videos if you haven't already. And if you have, look forward to some other content that I will be putting out later on down the line. But I just want to say in conclusion, if you can't afford to pay off your student loans, doesn't that just kind of prove they weren't worth that much to begin with?
He's Meat Stick, he's Meathead, he's Duke, he's my buddy, he's the boy.